Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Introduction to C2 Framework series here on the CyberRangers YouTube channel. In this video, we're going to be continuing off from where we left off in the previous video, where we were exploring how to set up and utilize PowerShell Empire for post-exploitation, specifically on Windows. And in this video, we'll be continuing by taking a look at how to configure and utilize the GUI front end for PowerShell Empire, which is Starkiller. So that's the focus of this video. And with that being said, let's get started. So first things first, with regards to Starkiller, I have the shortcut added right over here to the taskbar. I'm just going to open up a terminal, and we obviously need to start the server because Starkiller is just a GUI client. So we'll say sudo PowerShell Empire server. Give that a few seconds. Once the RESTful API is exposed, or the port is exposed rather, we should be good to go. There we are. All right, so that's ready. So I can just open up Starkiller. You can also search for it through the Whisker menu here, and I'll open it up. So it'll connect directly. Again, if you're working as an operator, you can of course change this to the actual IP or the domain of the C2 server that's running the Empire server. In this case, the default creds, if this is your first time using it, are going to be Empire admin and password 123, which you can change. So password 123. I can remember that just so that I can log in whenever I want. So I'll give you a tour of the interface first. So again, remember, this is an Electron app, which I'm not a fan of, realistically speaking, but you have a sidebar to your left here that contains all of the various elements or piece, all of the core functionality of Empire in essence, easily available. So you have your listeners, your stages, your agents. Sorry, there's your agents, and then your installed modules. So this is where you can search for whatever. So for example, if I search for Mimikatz, we'll just bring that up. The really cool thing is it sorts it in a way that is meaningful to a red teamer or adversary. So you can see you have the name, the language, so implementation rather, or the implant on which you can execute it on, whether it requires admin privileges, whether it's OPSEC safe, the background, which I'll get to, and you then have the MITRE attack techniques and or sub-technique IDs. To the bottom right here, you can see we have the collaborative chat, where you can essentially chat with all the other operators that have user accounts. So that can also be disabled if you don't really require that. You then have your credentials, which will become useful once we do some dumping. You then have reporting, which I'll get to as well. You then have your user profiles. Remember, not C2 profiles, but user profiles. So you can actually, create profiles for all your operators. You then have plugins. This is different than modules. These are elements or components that extend the functionality of the core, which is the Empire server. So in this case, the default ones that come prepackaged with the Empire are, the C# server for compiling the C# executable for your agents, the reverse shell stager server, SOX proxy server, and chisel server. And then, of course, you have your malleable profiles right over here. So in this particular case, you can take a look at some examples. Let's see. These are the profiles that currently exist. Let me show you some really interesting ones here, like the Gmail profile. So if you click on that, this will require you to have an HTTPS listener in order to work correctly. But this, if you just take a look at it here, this will sort of emulate or simulate communication, or essentially make it look like this is a Gmail web request, as it says right over here. Now, with regards to the functionality, that's sort of the evasion side of things. With regards to the functionality, what I wanted to show you here is Where's that highlighted here? That should be, there we are. So under the server options here, in this case, we don't have any custom configurations there. Let me find one that is good. Not search for it. We had the Outlook one. Did they change the name of that? Exchange. No, these ones are not there anymore. That's weird. I'm pretty sure that was there. Let me check the APT ones here. Yeah, that's weird. They usually had the one that was focused on Exchange. They still have the YouTube one. Yeah, there we are. They have that one still. So you have the ability to view it or duplicate it to modify it. I'll just open this one up here. And we'll probably use this as an example. I'm just trying to see whether these have any additional configurations. There we are. So yeah, for example, in this particular case for the HTTP config, you can set your headers, which is really cool. Most of them are commented. And in this case, it's set the trustx forwarded to false. You can set it true if the team server is behind a redirector, which is really interesting. And then you can change the URI. The host, the header host will point towards YouTube. And then you can also specify like the video ID. So YouTube videos usually have IDs. In this case, metadata is base64, yeah, URL encoded. That makes sense. But you can change this to legitimate YouTube video ID, something like, a Rickroll video, something like that. And then, yeah, for the server side, you have this here. This is the server side profile. And make sure you change the actual header expires parameter there. And also this one here, set cookie, that can also be changed. And the output, so you can change the way this output is handled. So in this case, is base64 encoded. And it is appended to the following HTML, I think. Yeah, to the following HTML page. And for post requests, the URI is set to p tracking. That's weird. I don't know why they would set it to that. But header, all the HTTP headers for the request are all set up in a way to make it look like it's coming from, or someone is watching a YouTube video. So those were the malleable profiles. You then have the bypasses. Right over here, which again I'll get to, but you can see you have the raster mask implementation for this. You also have manifestation. So if you open it up in here, you can see these are various ways you can bypass various railguards put into Windows with regards to execution, which again I'll touch on, because right now I want to sort of get into the actual demo here. For the settings, you have the chat widget, which you can disable. You also have a light mode, which again, I guess is cool. And then you can update the password for your user. And in this case, I'm not going to do that. And you can also clear the application state. This will clear the UI preferences and the locally stored stages that you generate. And then you have the API token here. And you can, of course, learn more about this. There we are. And we'll go back to the listener. So in this particular case, what we're going to be doing is we're going to set up a listener on the actual Empire C2 server, which is running on the Kali Linux system. And then we're going to leverage this web server as a redirector. So going back to that diagram in the slides, you can assume that this is a web server that belonged to the target company or the organization you're targeting and was part of both the internal network and the DMZ. Either way, you're able to get into it. Or again, it doesn't have to be part of the internal network at all. It could just be a web server that they own for even much more legitimacy with regards to egress traffic. So there's two cases here. You're going to assume that you've compromised it first. That could also be your initial access vector, but of course, that only gives you access to the web server, especially if it's public facing. So the first model is you're going to assume you've gotten access to their web server, and you're going to configure it as a redirector to make it, and then configure your stager or your implant, if you will, to call back or to beacon back to the redirector, which is the legitimate web server. that you now secretly own, so that the egress traffic or traffic on the network looks legitimate, because the computer is communicating with a web server that the company owns. So there's that. And then, of course, the redirector is configured to then forward or redirect the communication to the actual C2 server. This plays two roles, of course, one of them being that the IP is masked of the actual C2 server, since communication is all going to the redirector. And of course, that makes it makes it better if there is a domain, and in most cases, they usually are. The second deployment case that you can apply to this example that I'll be showing you here is that you've set up a web server to operate as a redirector, or vice versa, if you will. And you're going to use that as not really a proxy, but just a redirector, because we're not going to be modifying the headers or anything like that. So yeah, this can be done quite easily with PowerShell Empire. And I'll be doing this through Starkiller in this particular case. So to get started, we'll need to generate two listeners. The first listener is going to run on the actual Empire C2 server, which is the Kali Linux system. So let's set that up here. I'll just go ahead and create that. And this is going to be HTTP. And this is going to be tied to our IP here. And the port in this case can be 80, of course. If you have SSL, or if you want to encrypt it, then you know what you need to do. This is where you can play around with the default delay and the jitter. So, we can set this to maybe like, let's try 10 seconds. We can probably play around with it. And the jitter, we'll set this to 0.2. And the default loss limit can be left as is. The default profile can be changed in here. We'll leave it as is. And then the headers can be changed. So you can change this to, whatever you want. So let's say, Apache, something like that, whatever you want. This is where you can do anything you want. I can't type today for some reason. Okay, so you then have your other options here, which I've covered already, and as well as your cookie, and whether you have an additional proxy that you're using on the actual C2 server. So keep that in mind. And you have your Slack URL and the Stadia URI here. So this can be whatever you want it to be. In this case, we don't need it at the moment. So we're just going to click on create. Okay, this again is really buggy. So that's been created, but it's still not updated the state. So that's why I really don't like Electron apps. Again, nothing against the technology. But now we need to set up the HTTP hop listener. And this is not going to be running. We're not configuring it to run on the Empire server. We're going to essentially just create the listener and configure it to essentially forward or redirect the request to the actual HTTP listener. However, we need to create it here because we'll need to download the actual files that we'll be using that will facilitate the actual redirection. For this, we can utilize HTTP hop. So we'll just create this, and we'll just click on that there. And I'll explain the other ones, and I'll show you how to use them. But so now you need to specify the actual IP address or the host name or IP of the system for staging. So this is referring to the actual hop point, if you will. If you take a look at the servers here, we're going to be using the web server. So this is the IP. So just keep that in mind. So we'll put that in there. So HTTP, sorry about this. Let me type that in, HTTP, because we don't have SSL on that. Again, remember, if you're doing this, you specify the domain. So with the the appropriate protocol, 192.168.125.11. And you then specify your, wherever we want. So, and desktop, specify where you want to redirect the communication or the requests to. So in this case, we're going to be redirecting it to the HTTP listener that's running on the Empire server on the Kali Linux system. And then you can specify, whatever profile you want for the agent, if that is required. But in this case, let's just create it, because again, we're actually now really pushing the time limit here. In any case, happy to keep this going. So there we are. Now, remember, this is not hold on, that's weird. That was set to our IP. That's weird. Let me refresh this. Okay, yeah, that needs to change. That needs to be set. The host needs to accurately reflect the it needs to accurately reflect the IP address of the web server or the actual server for staging. So in this case, this needs to be set to 200. The port is set to 80, so you can just specify that there. That is set to the desktop now. Let me just check something here. Okay, yeah, so we want to get rid of this, and these are the files that'll handle the redirection. Yes to all. Okay, yeah, does require special permission, so I'll just create a folder here. Just call it if I can even type. Man. I think I need some coffee in any case. Desktop, and we'll specify that here. That's the folder to output the redirectors to. And this is set to the HTTP listener. Everything looks good this time. And we can just hit submit. Okay, so that's set up correctly this time. All right, so now if we take a look at the desktop here, hopefully those files were saved in here. All right, so what we can do now is I'm just going to go into my terminal and I'll open up a new tab. And we'll head over into the desktop. Take a look at, in fact, let's get rid of news.php as well. So chown. Let's do this recursively. Yep, forgot to run that with root privs. Let's just check the files in there. Okay, so admin login and use.php. Check the permissions here. Okay, I think we're good. So what we can do now is sort of create an archive here of this folder, and then we transfer it to that web server that we control. Again, in this particular case, I'm going to create an archive. And in this case, let's go for yeah, I think we just go for a tarball. Create that there. Okay, so in order to access the web server, we can do that via SSH. So we can just transfer the files as easily. In order to transfer them again, we can just, say you can utilize the SCP utility. So in this case, take a step back. Do we have it on the desktop? Yes, we do. So my bad, for some reason that popped up. So I'll take a look at your question shortly. But yeah, we'll just say sudo scp redirector tar.gzip, and I will then say range admin. That's the user on that Linux system. And we'll say 192.168.125.200, and we'll save it under the home directory, range admin. Yes. Okay, the password is password cr1. cr1. That's weird. Okay, so there we are, transferred successfully. And now we can log into that web server. So I'll just open up a web shell here. This is web SSH, so it should take us directly into that server. There we are. Okay, so we have the file here. And the first thing, of course, is we can just extract it. So I'm going to say sudo tar. And in this particular case, we will just, xzvf and redirector. Sorry, if I can actually type that in, man. Okay, so we have that folder there. We can pretty much just copy that folder, but we need to, essentially move the files from within into the default directory, the root directory for Apache 2. So just to confirm something here, do we have the Apache? We have Apache running. Yes, we do. Let me just check that here. All right, so that's working, no problem. And if we check that particular directory, we have it there. So we can essentially just say, we can just move that directory that we extracted to. Okay, so let's head over to that particular folder. There we are, and we want to copy all of these files in here. So I'll just say, by the way, hold the phone. Sudo copy all the files from redirector. That's weird. Redirector, there we are. And we'll then just put it under var html. Okay, we can now remove that redirector. Probably should have extracted it in here. Next thing we need to do is configure some permissions. So the permissions you would need to set, of course, here, the standard ones. Of course, in this particular case, I'm just going to say, for the purposes of this working correctly, we're going to need to apply the service account typically associated with the web servers or Apache in this particular case. So data. And we're then going to give these files the necessary permission. So 077, which I think should be fine. Let's do this recursively. And HTML. Okay, let's check everything in here now. Great. Okay, so now we can actually, this is set up correctly. So it means if we try and browse to it, which I'll actually do, but we can actually go ahead and set up our stager. So I'll go back into Kali here, and I'll go back into Starkiller. So we'll go into stages, and in this case, let's create, let's go Visual Basic. Now for the options, this is where you need to be specific. So remember, we want this stager when executed to communicate to the redirector, in this case, the HTTP hop listener. So we want to specify that as the listener. The redirector knows what to do. It knows to forward it to the HTTP listener on the C2 server, which is running Empire on the Kali Linux system, right? For the language, that we can, that's fine as PowerShell. We can then obfuscate here via invoke obfuscate. Yes, that is correct. And then because we've configured that listener, hold the phone. Why is this so slow here? Where is that option? Okay, so I think we can create this. That's going to create that stager for us. And now you can download the stager. I'll save it on my desktop. And now we can transfer it over to the target system, which again, in this case, we'll need to, we're simulating initial access in any case, just to show you how this would work. But could you remind me what I set the sleep timer for the HTTP listener to and the jitter? I think it's 0.20. In any case, we'll see it play out. So there we are. We'll go over to the target system, which is running Windows, and keep note of the IP. Well, you're already familiar with it, so we'll just take us in. And now we can, transfer it and execute it however we want. So in my case, just open up PowerShell and let's bring this up here. Okay, let's go back into Kali now. Should have gotten a call back. There we are. We get the new agent. And in essence, what has happened here is, I think I've already explained it. The agent is communicating with the redirector, and the redirector then forwards it to the listener on the Kali Linux system. So you can see it's functional. Now, what I would like to see is whether it's stuck. So if we click on the actual agent here, and I'll walk you through this, but if we go to view, what did we set here? There we are. Okay, so we set the delay to 10 seconds and jitter to 0.2, which makes sense. So we should actually see that play out. So if I open up Wireshark, I just want to see this, just to see, because there should be an additional delay because of what we've put in place. Well, not really, but there should be. Let's just filter that if I can actually type in HTTP. Okay, so every 10 seconds, and of course, factor in the jitter value we had set. So that's from 200. So you can see it's coming from the redirector as opposed to the actual target. And if we were to monitor it on the Windows system now, it would just be communicating with that web server. So every 10 seconds, much better. So you can now see with the sleep timer and jitter how you can play around with this. And when you have a redirector now, IP address of the actual C2 server is masked, and plus, from your perspective, you're only getting the traffic from the redirector. Okay, so now to walk you through some functionality with regards to the actual agents. So you have the ability to select an agent and view them, or bring this up in a pop-out menu, which I'll get to. And then if you go into the view section, you can rename this. So in this case, we'll say Win10. And there we are. You have the ability to interact, so you can execute a shell command, and I can say, who am I, just as an example. And then you have your interactive menu on your right here, or your interactive terminal on your right, which will display your tasks, the executed tasks and the results. So in this case, it doesn't look like anything's been executed yet, but of course, factor in the delays we have added and the actual infrastructure. So do we have Wireshark still up? This is a post. Anyway, let's go back in here. Just let's see, for some reason, back into agents. That usually takes a second for the interactive terminal to, there we are. No results here. So let's try and run one of those ones. Let's try and run a module as well. Let's run this one. Okay, so we can view the tasks that are set for execution. In this case, yeah, it looks like there's a bit of a delay here. Let me just refresh this. We go back to our agents. A few seconds, yeah. So we're still getting the callbacks, which is not an issue, but for some reason we're getting a bit of a delay here with the execution of specific tasks. And let's see if we view the file browser. By the way, I'm happy to take questions before we then move on to really quickly to Covenant. But yeah, that seems to work. We can view the contents of the C drive here. Yeah, there we are, no problem there. So we can actually access the system even though it's going through that additional server or redirector. Let's actually see if we can see the launcher Visual Basic script that was under admin. And you can also download and upload here. So that's very basic. This was on the desktop. And there we go. Yeah, I'm not sure why the actual tasks aren't being executed. That's weird. Although I'll give it a few seconds. There we are. Okay, so just giving you that example just to verify that. This should highlight the tasks, but for some reason that's not being updated here yet. If we can pop that out, whether this will sort of change anything here. Still the same thing. We can actually verify this, of course, by running the client as well, because this today has decided to bug out or bug. There we are. We can see the agent here. So agents win 10. Yeah, so okay, it's displaying it here. I can see all of the results for the navigation of the file system. Yeah, so it's working. So this is the Starkiller is the problem for some reason. I don't know like why this is the case. Hold on, there we are. Force reload. This is what you get. This is let's see if it's updated now. Yeah, that's very weird. But yeah, we can always utilize the trusted command line interface here, and that pretty much gives us exactly what we wanted. All right, so that is how to utilize Starkiller for post-exploitation, and that brings us to the end of this video and this section. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you found value in it, please leave a like down below. Furthermore, if you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, please drop them in the comment section. And if you feel this video is helpful or could be helpful to the cybersecurity community, then definitely share it via social media. With that being said, thank you very much for watching the video, and we'll be seeing you in the next video.